Good morning, guys. So today we're starting our final topic of the year, and that is trig identities. Okay, so basic trig identities. And basically, in this topic, you're going to learn about how the trig functions and a lot of the trigonometric expressions that you'll see can be rewritten in other forms. An identity is the definition of something, right? So like, for example, in this first one, sine of x equals 1 over cosecant x. That's an identity. We know that sine is also equal to the reciprocal of cosecant, or 1 over cosecant. So those two things are equal. And the point of this is we're going to rewrite expressions to help us cancel things out and simplify things. Okay, so for starters, you should know every identity, every single thing on this sheet of notes here. First off, you have 6 trig functions: sine, cosecant, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. And that's because there are 3 pairs of reciprocals, right? So sine and cosecant are each other's reciprocal, cosine and secant, and tangent and cotangent. If you flip one, you get the other. Okay, and then the other 2 things you should know is that tangent is sine divided by cosine, and cotangent is the opposite. Since cotangent's the reciprocal of tan, it's cos divided by sine. Okay, so you should know all of these, and basically you're going to use these rules to help solve some of these problems. Okay, so I'm going to go through these examples now. I think you guys will get the hang of it. So first, the directions are simplify to a single trig expression. So first off, simplify. You're not changing the value of any of these, you're just changing the way that they look or simplifying them. It's like how 2 over 4 gets reduced to a more simplified form of 1/2. Okay, that these trig functions and these expressions that we're dealing with here can be rewritten in a more simple form. Okay, so here are basically the 3 steps you're going to take to solve these problems. Okay, number 1, okay, is going to be to rewrite using trig identities, and I'm going to put in parentheses right in terms of sine and cos, and I'll explain what that means. All right, and then I'm going to go along the side here of the paper, number 2. So after you rewrite, you're looking to cancel things out. You're looking to see, do I have sine of x on top and bottom of the equation? I can just cancel them out. And then 3 is going to be simplify. Okay, essentially step 3 is like, if my answer says cosine divided by sine, now I'm just going to simplify and write that that equals cotan. All right, so those are your 3 steps. Write that somewhere on your paper. Pause the video now if you need to take those notes. All right, and I'm going to go ahead on number 1. So the first thing is I want to explain what I mean by number 1 here when I say write in terms of sine and cos. Okay, so all 6 trig functions can be written in terms of sine or cos. What do I mean by that? Okay, so sine equals sine, cosine equals cosine. Tangent. Whenever you have a tangent, you can rewrite it as sine divided by cosine. So basically rewriting it, now I don't have tan, I only have sine and cos. And then cotangent, you can rewrite as cos over sine. Cosecant, you can change to 1 over sine, and then secant to 1 over cosine. So basically, once you simplify all of them, you should only see sines and cosines. All right, so let's show what that means here. So example 1, I have 3 trig functions being multiplied. Cotangent, I know, is cosine of x divided by sine of x. Okay, I'm multiplying that by secant. Remember, write in terms of sine and cos. In terms of sine or cos, secant is 1 divided by cosine. And then sine, whenever you get sine or cos, they're already in terms of sine or cos. You don't need to change the way sine or cosine look. Okay, so now I have three fractions. Multiplying fractions, you multiply across the top and you multiply across the bottom. So I have cosine times 1 times sine of x, or cos of x times sine of x. On the bottom, sine of x times cos of x times 1. Okay, so the same exact thing, sine of x times cos of x. All right, on top, I have a sine, on bottom a sine, on top a cos, on bottom a cos. They're all going to cancel out, and my final answer is just 1. Okay, so anytime, no matter what x is, if you multiply cotan x times secant of x times sine of x, it will equal 1. All right, let's try number 2 now. So I see cosine. Now, don't get thrown off by the notation here. That weird looking A is an alpha. Alpha is a Greek letter, sometimes used for a variable. So you guys are used to theta for angles or x for anything. Okay, alpha, and then you'll see on number 4, this B is a beta. Don't get thrown off by that. It just means x. Okay, so cos of alpha times, now remember, secant is 1 over cosine alpha. Okay, and I'm going to leave cotangent on the bottom for now. I want to just sort of simplify the top first. So I have cosine times 1 over cosine. Well, you could think of cos as cosine divided by 1. So multiplying across, I'm going to get cosine divided by cosine. And I get cos of alpha over cos of alpha, and that's all over cotan alpha. And you know anything divided by itself is just 1. Okay, so I'm going to take this down here now. And I have 1 over cotangent of alpha. Okay, so now, like some of you might be thinking, oh, the next step is I need to rewrite cotangent as cos divided by sine. But you would really be working harder than you have to because we already have our answer. 1 divided by cotangent is, hopefully you all got it, tangent. When you see 1 divided by cotan, that's right here. Your answer is just tangent of alpha. Okay, or tangent of x if you want to just use x. All right, moving on to number 3. Cosine of x is good. We want it in terms of sine and cos. And then tangent, you know, hopefully, is sine divided by cosine. Okay, so multiplying across the top, I get cos of x times sine of x. On bottom, I get cos of x. Those cosine on top and bottom will cancel out. And that's just equal to sine of x. Okay, so cosine of x times tangent of x equals the sine of x. All right, now last one. I just want to go over the notation for this one first. With trig functions, when they are squared, right? So like let's say you have sine of x times sine of x. You would think, the way that you've always learned math, that that equals sine of x squared. And you're not wrong. But the way that that is written for trig functions is you write the squared before the x. So you say that equals sine squared of x, and it means the same thing. Okay, so when you guys see this here, secant squared of beta times cotangent squared. Okay, so secant, remember, write it in terms of sine and cos. Secant is 1 divided by cosine. So secant squared is 1 over cosine squared. Cotangent, remember, is cosine divided by sine. So I have cos beta over sine beta. Oh, and excuse me, it was cotangent squared. So that's cosine squared beta over sine squared. Okay, now multiply across the top, across the bottom. I get cosine squared of beta divided by cos squared beta times sine squared beta. Those cosine squareds will cancel. So I have just 1 on top, and I have sine squared on bottom. Okay, and now this is like the step 3 simplify. 1 over sine squared, well, 1 over sine is cosecant. So that is equal to cosecant squared beta. All right, guys, so make sure that you completely filled out these notes and submit them. That's your class participation grade for the day. And then you have an assignment on Delta Math for your, you'll get a homework grade for that. All right, but if you totally did not understand what happened in this video here, make sure that you reach out now with your questions before you start the Delta Math. All right, have a great day, guys.